Thank you for joining us today for the uShip Long Haul Podcast. This is episode 17. We have a really special episode for you today. Joe Hafke is normally the host of the Long Haul Podcast. He is off on assignment. So my name is Dean Jutilla, Vice President of Corporate Communications at uShip, and I will be hosting today's webinar and podcast. We have a really special guest this week with us. Parimala Rao, thank you for joining us. She joined us recently as the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer at uShip. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And you can call me Pari, by the way.
Okay, I'll call you Pari. We'll do that. We have probably three things we're going to cover in this podcast. We're going to talk a bit about your career in technology. We're going to talk a bit about you coming to uShip and what that has looked like recently, and then also kind of what you think about uShip's future and where that might land here going forward in a very fascinating logistics space right now. And then if you are a transporter or you are a shipping customer joining us today, we really thank you for joining us. You're going to be hearing, as I mentioned, about uShip's future, but you are a big part of that, and so you'll be able to hear kind of what the world looks like for you when it comes to working with uShip. And if you are someone who has been in technology for a long time or just getting into technology, you could be able to hear about Pari's really interesting career at some of the most fascinating companies in the world and how she has played a part in those companies. So Pari, let's get started and let's talk a bit about the roles you've had in your career. You know, they've stretched the gambit and in terms of the size of the companies, the types of the companies, and where they're located. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of how those have shaped your career and some of those companies that you've been at?
Absolutely. So I have been in the technology space for about 2.5 decades now. And in the first decade, I have been more on the West Coast, where I have worked in the Silicon Valley, a lot of different companies. And to a large extent, my focus was on improving my technology expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And I would definitely love to talk a little bit about a few companies that I spent a lot of time with. And in the latter part of my life, I have been focused more on the West Coast, where I have taken on senior leadership positions. And primarily, I focused on shaping the future of technology and product for the organizations. So,
Gotcha.
to
So
name
yeah, let's talk about your West Coast. You went from you were there, and then and let's talk about your time maybe in your early years of Google and how that looked.
Sure, absolutely. So, talking about Google, I joined Google in 2006 and during its formative years. And working for Google, I realized earlier on the significance of engineering and building code that essentially was key to the mission of the organization, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And how it kind of guided us was it guided our path towards building code. Google is a pure technology company and it lives and breathes engineering. I enjoyed the back to school experience at Google, where I helped very large and diverse globally distributed engineering teams to achieve their highest potential, building massive enterprise scale solutions that impacted billions of users around the world. And as I transitioned over to the East Coast, I, in fact, would love to talk about the New York Times,
Mm-hmm.
where I took on the role of their executive director. And primarily, I was driving the redesign for their www.nytimes.com and also building core new products. Giving you an example, the Times Machine. My role primarily was driving innovation through technology, and I just loved it. The, Talking a little bit about the New York Times. Now, the New York Times was founded way back in time in 1851. And since then, the organization has won over 130 Pulitzer Prizes and is being regarded as the newspaper of record. For me, it was the ultimate honor joining the organization as their first woman lady executive director.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also fun building the overarching digital experience for an organization that for the longest time was driven print first. And I'm talking about long as in over 150 plus years.
Yeah. That's a long
And
legacy of the gray lady, right? That's interesting. Um, as you talk about your career, sorry to interrupt you there for a bit, but you talk about your career that's going from an extreme of Google or even IBM before that, and then Microsoft, another company you were lured away to from Google, um, and and then moving to the New York Times and turning that digital. I mean, that's a quite a spectrum of technology swing there that you've taken on, and with a great accomplishment.
absolutely. And the reason primarily was I wanted to kind of really spend my earlier part of my career focused heavily on understanding all forms of technology, and also making sure that I understand the intricacies of how technology can have a huge impact on not just businesses, but in some cases millions of users around the world. And that is where my role was instrumental in IBM, in Microsoft, in Google, where when we were initially thinking about an idea, it could be a small idea, a POC that a few of us would sit together and kind of literally build together. But then as we would build on it, it would essentially stretch to several millions around the world. And that is the kind of impact that I always wanted to have through technology.
Mm, gotcha. Okay, so let's transition now to the second part of our program. And you're based out of New York and work for all these global companies that are making huge impacts on the world. And then there's this little company out of Austin that comes on your radar, and that being uShip, of course. How did you learn about us? And kind of what did you find was so interesting and attractive, to leave your role at Spark Fund, which were you were most recently a CTO, to then come to uShip, and you joined us recently. Obviously, we're give you some time to find out where get your bearings and things at uShip before we do an interview with you about what's the future of the company. But the idea that you found us attractive, and in terms of when to talk to us, tell us more about that and maybe that recruiting process a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So it was actually an outreach effort by uShip's excellent recruiting team. I was, in fact, pleasantly surprised to hear directly from uShip regarding the CTO opportunity. And after a few meetings and interactions with some key people at uShip, they got me all excited and jazzed about the opportunity. And there you go, I landed here at uShip.
Gotcha.
So, thinking a little deeper, I would say that a lot of the decision making around uShip was primarily key around the entire 2020 atmosphere. So, in 2020, our globe was hit with COVID. The pandemic transformed how humans essentially live and work. And a lot of companies were forced overnight to change the way they work to completely remote or virtual. And it fast tracked a lot of the in the future kind of work that companies had, to literally kind of working in the present. Now, that to me was something that was key when I started looking at uShip and the pivotal strategic positioning that it has in the logistics e-commerce marketplace, and where it is today focused on providing shipping services. And as you know, 2020, almost everybody was ordering everything online, right? From their groceries to trying to move to newer locations, because with remote working, they could essentially live anywhere in the US. And last but not the least, it was more than anything, it has completely transformed the way we do business. And that to me was key in my decision making when I looked at uShip and how strategically positioned it was to serve this particular need.
Got you. So as you've been here a bit of time. What has been your initial impression of uShip, as a business, in the market? Because you're learning more about logistics now, probably because this is your first time into logistics, as I understand it, but
That's
really
correct.
bringing that technical background, which uShip is truly a technical company in logistics. And so, your role is obviously critical. Um, Talk a little bit about maybe your initial impressions, but also one thing that maybe helps our users is, as a CTO at uShip, what does that mean day to day? Like, what areas do you generally oversee, that you that you'll be anticipating jumping into even further now?
Absolutely. So, my initial impression of the company since I've joined has been extremely good. Right from the fact that, on one hand, it's an excellent place. We have great people who are highly intelligent, very motivated, and dedicated to furthering the organization's mission and vision. And to me, at uShip, our mission is to revolutionize the shipping and transportation industry through the power of technology. And essentially, we want to ship anything, anywhere, anytime. Now that said and done, given that I'm still kind of learning the ropes of the
Sure.
organization and
Yeah.
trying to understand how I can impact technology in a huge way, my day-to-day work essentially is trying to literally drink from the fire hose, in the sense that I'm trying to understand how we can further some of the products that we're building, such that we can literally open up the platform and fully productionize the platform, so all our customers, our partners can essentially leverage the maximum benefit out of our core platform. And that said and done, I'm also keen on looking at some of the existing engineering or technology practices and solutions that we have in place. And I'm hoping to not necessarily reinvent, but make sure that we are building for the future. And that is essentially thinking about scale, thinking about capacity, and making sure that we are leveraging all the strengths in big data analytics, in machine learning, in AI, in areas where if we have the ability to expand into, we will have the ability to reach a much broader audience base, while also making sure that we are helping them with the needs of the hour more than anything else.
Right. And that's as you think about uShip and its nearly 17 years of existence, all of the shipments that have gone through and recorded as a marketplace, we're sitting on a vast mountain of data, in like around shipping price, and distance, and there's a lot of things there, and your background in data science, and Internet of Things and all of that. Really excited to be able to kind of we're already doing some things with machine learning today, and pricing algorithms and so forth, but putting that all together to set ourselves up for it's really fascinating to see that. I've been at uShip a long time, and being able to see a lot of these things come together with the technology is really, really exciting. There's kind of another interesting angle I wanted to ask you about, and that is it goes back to the fact that you're recruited. We contacted you from uShip. Do you feel like recruiting is different today when it comes to COVID world and working remotely, and how, talk a bit about that in terms of um, was you maybe looking at a local area, and now we're thinking a national. We didn't just have to look at Austin as a recruiting space. Talk a little bit about that in terms of your impression about recruiting and what it means today.
Absolutely. So for me, in fact, joining uShip, this has been the first ever experience of me joining a company fully remote. And this is over 2.5 decades of experience out there. So
Mhm.
I have to say that it's really, really hard because, to a large extent, I am working in an organization where I have still not personally met anybody. And
Right.
that for me is strange because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we're working with people, we're working for our customers. So that itself is a dramatic transformation in how companies today are not just managing their businesses, but are also trying to build for the future.
Hmm.
And I must say, so far, the uShip team has done a fantastic job in ensuring that I'm getting plugged into the core of the company, right from connecting with all its people, its processes, its products, and most importantly, technologies. So, from my point of view, the way I see it going to be different moving forward is it is a lot harder to do everything remotely. And for people who are joining organizations in the remote kind of phase of life, I would definitely say that the onus is on us to ensure that we are doing the outreach as well, and that we are trying to get ourselves fully embedded within the core of the organization. And that, I think, will help us move forward.
Right. right? It's been a we've tried to incorporate you into some of our end of quarter meetings, and I think that's been, like I said, that fire hose experience for you. It's been a vast one. So appreciate you jumping in. It is a bit of a new bit of a case study and onboarding. Like you said, it's a completely different world. In addition to the recruiting experience, which might mean that it's a little easier for that person out of an area of a company to pick up that phone and answer that call for a recruiting inquiry. And so it changes the whole complexion of things. So let's talk a little bit about this next phase of our conversation, and that is the opportunity that stands in front of uShip. And I'll set the context for our listeners and our viewers here, and that is uShip for a long time started off as a marketplace for consumers to ship large and bulky items, cars, boats, motorcycles, pets, equipment, and so forth. Over time, we have evolved that marketplace to become more business centric. So while someone might ship something occasionally, you might find business shippers with high volume shipments per day and per month. And so we've moved into that quite dramatically in the last several years. And so we're seeing an opportunity here to kind of really escalate that opportunity as a business. So Pari, obviously you're aware of our heritage with that and moving into the business sector. If you can talk a little bit about what you see, where that technology that you would bring and experience you bring can help kind of supercharge that experience for business shippers and for carriers in that regard, and that it just means more shipping volume, more guaranteed volume that's going to be coming to them as transporters on the marketplace. And so you could talk a little bit about that if you wouldn't mind, and what you see as some of the future going forward with uShip.
Absolutely. So, just like I articulated a little while earlier, 2020 has been a transformational year for everyone. And with that, the logistics industry as a whole is on a verge of transformation, and uShip, I see, is at the center of it all. Now, uShip has an existing platform that it has been using for almost 15 plus years through a whole lot of transformations. And it essentially kind of functions as an e commerce marketplace where it helps pattern match between shippers and carriers. And I see that we can essentially productionize this to all our partners and customers to help them engage with the e commerce marketplace from all angles. Now, uShip today sits on a ton of data. We have data around shippers, we have data around carriers, we have data around the logistical pieces that we move from point A to point B. And more intelligently, we have information on routes and on our core logistics industry as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I see it, and again, my crystal ball may be kind of restricted or limited today, given that I'm still kind of learning about this new sector and I'm trying to
Sure.
understand how we can apply all the latest and greatest in terms of, say, e-commerce technologies, data science, APIs, everything that kind of can be applied to the logistics space. But from where I see it, I see a future where the logistics industry is going to be dominated by the Internet of Things using machine to machine kind of technology. So to a large extent, if you think about it, um, the Internet of Things can help us literally connect all kinds of things, devices that can be distributed in n number of locations, and it will impact logistics and supply chain management in a very huge way because it'll help us increase speed, decrease waste, and reduce overall costs when it comes to people trying to ship things from point A to point B. And apart from that, there are a lot of futuristic technologies that will come into play. And I'm saying drone delivery, driverless intelligent vehicles, touchless technologies, a lot of things that will dominate in the future. And the fact that uShip has already been solving some of these really hard and complex logistics problems. To a large extent, I feel that we already have a one up in terms of having the ability to move faster into the future.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk a bit about the what that means for a business shipper who, let's talk a bit about APIs. and what that means for taking the uShip experience on uShip and putting it on those customer sites like we're doing now with a number of partners, but obviously that's going to become more and more important as a business. You talked a little bit about what an API is in general, and then what that would look like for a business shipper who's looking to move e-commerce large and bulky, and how they can get that done.
Absolutely. So, for listeners who may not necessarily be from the technology realm, an API essentially is an application programming interface that helps people partner with, say, a platform without necessarily having to make extreme changes to the core platform. So, they can essentially kind of connect with the APIs that we publicly expose, and they can essentially have an exchange of data. Very simplistic, super simplistic view is where you have a data exchange without necessarily having transformation of the core applications behind the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And how it helps them is a lot of the times, I mean, rather than say a partner making a serious number of changes to their front end, or say us making serious changes to either our front end, back end, or the way we interface with our partners, we have the ability to exchange information through APIs. And that helps our partners to essentially connect with us at a faster rate without necessarily having to go through complex integration challenges on either sides, either on our side or on their side.
Got you. That's one example of that we're doing right now today is with eBay Motors, and anybody who's on an eBay Motors listing online, and you pull that up, you're going to see multiple rates get pulled in through an API, and uShip providing to eBay Motors, and you see multiple rates there, and you can make your choice and then move forward with your purchase of that vehicle or dream car, whatever that might be. So, well, this is fascinating. Anything you want to continue to add to this in terms of uShip's future and the opportunity that sits in front of it?
Oh, absolutely. One last thing I would love to say or add is that a lot of the future is going to be transformational from the fact that if you're thinking about fleet and logistics providers, you will see that there's going to be a lot of intelligence in terms of capabilities such as reverse geocoding, route tracking, having the ability to self kind of manage speed limits, geofencing, and also having the next generation tracking when it comes to solutions like goods and shipments. And I'm not saying that we at uShip will be focusing on everything at this point of time. This is possibly going to be, I'm talking about the next 5 to 10 year horizon. I'm not necessarily
Mhm.
talking about the next 1 or 2 years um, from the technology standpoint. But that said and done, a combination of the work that we'll be doing on the platform, on our API front, and the change or the transformation that will happen in the logistics space as a whole will help us to be better positioned to work with large carriers or with our business shippers in such a fashion that we'll be able to provide our customers with faster, cheaper, and more reliable or sustainable delivery. And that, to me, is at the essence of literally kind of working in the logistics space in the future with innovation and technology at its center point.
Very true, and the bar has been raised dramatically, not only by Amazon in terms of its speed and expectations that customers have today, but also with 2020, as you mentioned, and the needs of e-commerce and the way it's fulfilling people's lives. And we are now on a first name basis with our UPS man here and at our house, and so that has just and FedEx, and I guess to that degree. And so I'm sure everyone has kind of found themselves in an e-commerce world today, and that is going to continue. And really excited that you're here at uShip, and really fascinating background that you bring to us. And we're really looking forward to taking these, really escalating this business that we know as uShip and is helping so many today. So,
Thank
Pari,
you so
thank you
much.
so
Great.
much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you for your time. And thank you for those who were listening and watching. And we'll see you next time on The Long Haul.